Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm back home.
Yeah, your audio notably better.
Is it?
Absolutely. You must be back on your fancy podcast mic.
I call it now the Hillary Clinton microphone.
Now, why is that?
Because Hillary started a podcast. Hey, fellow podcaster Hillary.
Finally, Hillary Clinton joins the ranks of us.
Finally, she gets a platform, I've always said. And they released a picture of her, as one does when they start a podcast, they do a big press release. We did all this, of course. And she had a microphone that looks suspiciously like the one I'm using now. I assume it's a level or two up.
I don't think so. I think it's the exact one.
You mean she went on Amazon and she went with the 159 and not the 276 one? I mean, really?
I think she used her private server and I think she went on to Amazon. The receipt is probably inside a server in her basement, and we have to find out what it says.
Yeah, what? Yeah, we have to get those receipts.
Though, I noticed she does not have the plush mic cover that we each have.
It's very possible that was just a photograph. They were just in a random place.
I think that's right. I think that they did not have the proper setup. In fact, they probably didn't even have her real mic, and some, doofus like us, on her staff was like, oh, I got a bike. We just put it up for the photo.
At this point, though, don't you worry that now that everyone has a podcast, that there'll be no more listeners?
Well, every podcast has a listener of one, but ours is ahead because we have a listener of two. That's you and me. That's the beauty of having two hosts.
That's true. We each have our own friends and family that occasionally listen.
Yeah, though I've noticed my family that used to be avid listeners in quarantine are like, I'm going to catch it later. I don't know. I'll binge it at some other point.
No, it's going over to Michelle's podcast or something. You see, this is competition, Hillary and Michelle. We can't treat them as...
True. As the celebrities are getting into it, it is getting harder.
Mayor Pete started one.
Is that true?
It is true, yeah. I think he's directly coming after my audience.
What's it called?
It's probably called Coming Out Late with Mayor Pete.
Baby Pete.
Baby Pete.
Baby Talk with Pete. Now, Ryan, I have to ask, but given that you've just ended, I mean, how long were you away? It feels like months.
Almost 2 months, I think, yeah.
Golly. And it was all that time in Tennessee?
Tennessee, and then a little bit of North Carolina in like not the suburbs, but like rural North Carolina outside of Asheville, like 30 miles outside of Asheville.
And so we're going to have a bunch of episodes covering a number of the places that you visited. And now, how many Airbnbs? That's what you were doing, right? You were hopping Airbnbs every few weeks?
5 Airbnbs.
5 to get through 2 months. So you really settled down in a few places.
Yeah, we tried to settle down so we would have 2 full weekends and 1 full work week at any given Airbnb. Just because moving is such a pain in the butt, when you've got like work stuff and, you pack a lot for that kind of trip.
And you rented a car?
Borrowed my mom's car. I still have it.
God
I know. Well, she has an extra car because she lives down the beach, so she gets a lot of family visitors. So she has this extra car that
Ryan grew up in a resort town in Maryland. We all know that.
But now it's parked in Bushwick. I parked it on the street the first day, and now I put it in a parking lot because
that car must be so scared.
I was scared for it. I mean, it was so embarrassing, Kiernan. They say the theater is shut down in New York, but watching me parallel park, best show in town. People gathered around, giving me advice. I really brought the community.
Eventually, were people trying to help you?
People were trying to help me. Finally, I was just so mortified. I just pulled away and drove away. I just gave up.
Horrible. I'm a master parallel park. Absolutely, I'm fantastic at it.
I was very close to just calling a friend and being like, "Hey, what are you doing? Can you come over and park my car right now?"
Nightmare. Oh my God! If I were still in New York, I'm sure you would have called me. I'll be there in an hour and a half. I've got to get on the subway, get all the way out to Bushwick, walk to your place. Judy, she must have been thrilled just to see you. It's lovely that you finally go out to see your mom just to take her car away.
Yeah, but I get to return the car too, so that's 2 visits.
So how long are you going to stay? A couple weeks?
I'll probably stay a little bit. I want to do an episode down there. So
that'd be great. We would all love an episode about your sort of wealthy resort town that you grew up in Maryland.
Eastern Shore of Maryland.
The Eastern Shore of Maryland. Yes. Yeah, you've got your favorite things there. I should do a Connecticut Shore episode. We could do a whole shore series.
You guys have pizza and P.T. Barnum's house.
How have I not done a New Haven episode? I
don't
love
know.
New Haven.
Yeah, New Haven is nice.
Well, Ryan,
we got a lot today, though.
Yeah, we got a lot today because we're, this is the first time since quarantine that we're going to go back to destination-specific episodes. And we're doing this because, we've now been in lockdown coming up on 7 months. And you and I each found a way during the summer while some states were getting back into safer territory to take small trips that focused on being in a car and not going into as many public places and taking safety precautions.
Yeah.
You, in your case, as you said, went to North Carolina and Tennessee, and you did that kind of a big road trip. For Catherine, the baby Charlie, and I, we decided to go to Maine. And so this episode,
the baby was a part of that decision.
The baby was
Charlie weighed in.
For what it's worth, the baby was like, of course, the major decision maker because how many hours can he stand in a car?
Right.
And yeah, so we decided to go to Maine, and particularly we were in the area called Downeast Maine. So we're going to focus on that. I'm going to give a bunch of tips and recommendations for what you can do in the Downeast region. And we're going to talk about why it's even called the Downeast. And I think we should jump right in because there's a lot to get through.
Yeah, I think it's already time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan. Well, before we focus on Downeast Maine, which for those who aren't familiar with Maine, I should say is the name of a specific region in Maine. We're going to talk about Maine more generally. Now, Ryan, I believe you've mentioned on past pods that you've never been to Maine.
I have never been to Maine. It's one of the. It's obviously the only state in this side of the country that I haven't been to. I've been everywhere else.
That is really weird because you've been. I mean, how many states do you think you've been to?
I have been to in the high 30s, like 36 or 37. Yeah,
you're on the downslope. I mean, Maine should be your next quarantine pick for a road trip.
I think it would be a perfect spring road trip.
It'd be nice if you'd swing by Boston.
I look, now that people have just forgotten about the pandemic, I can come on by, right?
I mean, New England's doing okay. We're like the safest part of the country.
It's getting cold up there, though.
For what it's worth, Maine, extremely safe. And we had to get COVID tests before we could go in. They asked that people from Massachusetts, which is doing relatively well, take COVID tests, and we, being good citizens, abided. And there was a real feel of it didn't feel the pandemic was not breathing down your neck in the same way that it is in a lot of other places. And that's because it's pretty darn rural. So I thought I'd just give you a couple of quick Maine facts that you might find interesting and kind of set the scene of the spirit of Maine. It's a pretty rural state. And it is famous, of course, for its lobster haul. And as you're driving through Maine, you see lots of lobster boats, lobstermen. You see lobster traps. It's kind of in the culture. And while you're there, you do tend to gorge yourself on lobster, particularly now because it is price competitive. And it harvests the majority of the lobster in the United States. So it really is a dominant industry. It's not just a caricature in Maine.
So I love lobster.
Do you love lobster?
I love lobster. So I have heard for years about just all these little lobster shacks that you can just go to in Maine. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I hear that Portland is like the place to get lobster.
I mean, you can really, there are those shacks and those, there's even a lot of like wholesalers that you can just walk up and say, hey, can I buy 2 or 3 lobsters? And they'll we actually got a bucket of mussels for free because they were like, you only want a pound. I'm filling like 50-pound bags over here.
Yeah, it's like the Chesapeake Bay with blue crabs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And in fact, our Airbnb host just offered as like a nice add-on. Hey, do you want like the lobsterman who lives next door to come over and bring you a couple lobsters for dinner some night? So like that's how kind of commonplace it is.
Oh, that's a nice Airbnb.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh.
It was great.
we had a Carrig, so
And Maine is very much divided between the fact that it's got this long coastline. It actually has 3,478 miles of coastline, which I was shocked to learn is more than California's coastline.
Really?
Yes, really. I mean, just by a little. California's at 3,427 and Maine's at 3,478. So it just eked out that extra little bit. Good thing Canada didn't come for those.
Wow. I mean, just thinking in my head of the map, that does not work. But
well, it's because, I mean, you have to think it's got kind of that rabbit's head that you kind of lead around all the ears. And plus, if you include all the islands, I mean, there are 3,166 islands off the coast of Maine, many of them very, very tiny. But if you were to include all of that coast, no, that is without those. With those, it would be 5,000 miles of coast.
Okay. Wow.
Shocking.
That is shocking.
And so there's only 2 states that have more coastline. You could probably guess one of them. The other one I wouldn't have guessed.
More coastline. Florida?
Yeah, Florida, absolutely, of course, because it just juts out there.
It's only a coast.
And the second one is actually Louisiana.
Really?
Yeah, I guess, go look at the map. Well, once you take a look, it's not as surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I was planning my little adventure, we considered going to some beach towns in Louisiana, and I'm not surprised. It looked like a whole kind of Ozarks world out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maine is also, it's huge. And you have kind of this huge coastline that we're talking about. And many, I think for those who have visited, the Maine beaches, the water tends to be very, very chilly, even in the middle of summer. But really nice scenic beaches. You get a mix of like sand beaches and also rocky, stony beaches. And I'm going to talk about one of those that is well worth visiting. And then away from the coast, you have really dense forest. You have a lot of state parks, nature preserves. And so there's lots of good hiking, which I know is something you've been turned on to in the quarantine. One of the silver linings of the quarantine is that Ryan got some hiking boots.
It's true. I love hiking.
Now, interestingly, Maine is actually bigger than the other 5 New England states combined, just to give you a sense of the size.
So you could fit all those states
fit, but then when you really think about it, Mass is Mass is fairly wide, I guess. But then you have Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont. So, they're pretty small.
Yeah, Vermont and New Hampshire are really small. Yeah.
Yeah. How about Rhode Island? Rhode Island's really small.
Yeah, is that a state? I guess it is, right? Technically.
Yeah. Has the teeniest coastline. It's just a couple inches. And on top of lobster, one of the major things that Maine is known for is blueberries. It actually produces over 90% of the country's blueberry crop.
That I did not know.
I didn't know it either, but it is a major tourist attraction during the summers. There's like little blueberry roadside attractions where you can go and you can get blueberry ice cream and blueberry soda and blueberry cakes.
Did you go picking? Did you go blueberry picking?
We didn't go picking. You don't tend to do that.
Okay.
But you can stop by a lot of farmhouse stands, or some people. One kind of trend that I liked along the road was many people have a little, almost like a big post box at the front of their driveway where they put out excess vegetables and blueberries that they've grown, and you can just leave a couple dollars in the box and take the produce.
That's a very my hometown thing with strawberries. I love that.
It's super charming. And also, one thing that I did not appreciate enough about Maine, and then when I went back and read about my Airbnb, I realized I should have paid more attention, was vast distances between towns when you get out into the more rural areas. I mean, you can really go half hour, 45 minutes, 50 minutes without hitting any stores, just kind of dotted little farms along the way. And this means that you really need to load up on groceries. So those little farm stands were really, they really saved us as far as many of our dinners.
Yeah, I can imagine.
All right, just 2 more quick facts, Ryan. Now, today we're going to talk about Acadia National Park. And we're also going to talk about a couple state parks. But just to give you a sense of how much land is protected, 542,629 acres are state and national parks in Maine. So you will not want for places to go hike and enjoy yourself. And, much of that is on the coastline. So you can enjoy protected beaches. So you absolutely want to plan an outdoor trip. And this kind of tells you why Maine's nickname is Vacationland. That's the state, well-known state nickname. It's got a license plate that I love, which has a little conifer with a pine cone, and it says Vacationland along the bottom. And to me, this really harks back to kind of the 1940s and 50s, kind of everybody load in the station wagon. We're going camping for a week up in Maine. And
Maine was never a Amtrak destination, was it? Like the train is not a big part of Maine's history.
Actually, Ryan, train service was a big part of shuttling, especially kind of the Boston crowd up into Maine. And there used to be some really charming route names that brought people up there. Many of them are scrapped now, but I thought you might enjoy this. You've got the Downeaster route, which makes sense because we're going to talk about Downeast. You also had a train called the Pine Tree and the Flying Yankee. And the Flying Yankee, those trains went from Boston to Bangor.
That is Flying Yankee's perfect.
But, those were an extinct rail company called the Boston and Maine Railroad. So, there was obviously enough business to sustain there. But all passenger operations between Portland and Boston scrapped in 1965. So it actually goes to what I was saying about that kind of 1950s.
Right.
Maine was a real destination place. I feel like that's where Vacationland really was earned. And the last fun fact that I pulled that I thought you'd be interested in is Maine's coastline has so many deep harbors, it could provide anchorage for all the Navy fleets in the world.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah. I mean, that would really change the vibe of Maine, though, right? If it was just
the most
battleships. Yeah. It wouldn't be as quaint. I mean, it would probably be terrible for the lobster population, too. So
I don't know. If you could go tour different Navy ships from nations around the world, it's pretty fascinating. But you're right. It would probably freak the lobstermen out.
Yeah. So good fact, but nothing that Maine should, think about doing.
Now, today we're going to talk specifically about what's called the Down East region of Maine. And Ryan, you're probably wondering, why is it called Down East?
Why is it called Down East?
So it is the eastern part of the state, but what I think is very funny is that it's very far north. So it's a little confusing to call it Down East. And it basically covers these two counties, Washington and Hancock counties. And it is sort of known as the Down East and Acadia region of Maine. And it includes the gateway town into Acadia National Park, which is called Bar Harbor. And the reason that it's called Down East is because you used to have a major trade between this area along the shore and the full coast of New England. And in order to get back up to this area of Maine, you would head in a northeasterly direction and the wind was at your back. So they would call it Down East because you were downwind, even though you were heading north. So it's really, really very intuitive.
It's like sort of down home or down, down under.
Yeah, it is kind of like down under. It's like the reverse of down under. All right, Ryan. And while we're talking about names, we should head into the first destination I want to talk about, which is Acadia National Park. And I want to touch on a lot of places today, so we're not going to do a deep dive into Acadia. We're just going to touch upon it. I'm going to tell you a few things that we experienced there, give you a little history, and we're going to move on to further places in the Down East region because I want this to be more of an overview. But I do think on a future episode, we'll come back, we'll do a deep dive into Acadia National Park specifically.
Even deeper dive than this?
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Wow.
Despite the
Maine is going to end up it's going to be like Peru. There's going to be like 6 episodes.
Oh, you mean one of our best performing series of episodes, Ryan? Is that what you're saying?
Mexico City 1 and 2. Yeah.
Also, I don't know if you've been keeping up on the reviews. We've got people saying, I was searching for Machu Picchu podcast.
Right,
I came up on the pod and I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Sticking with it. Great chemistry between the hosts.
What episode were they talking about?
I think Peru, where it was me talking 90% of the time, and you going, yep, Incas, yep.
Those are folks' favorite episodes.
So Ryan, Acadia National Park, I thought it had never occurred to me, why is it called Acadia?
I have no idea.
Well, Ryan, it probably won't surprise you that the name Acadia has a very long and complicated history. But what it basically boils down to is that it's derived from a Native American term. The Mi'kmaq people had a word that meant a piece of land. And it seems like you could generally apply that.
Every park is Arcadia Park.
Yeah, exactly. And, obviously, you're not terribly far from the French-speaking area of Canada when you're in Maine. And it was the French who were exploring this area of Maine and Canada. And they took that word and made it into l'Acadie, which basically referred to this area. And then Acadia basically became the English usage over time. But interestingly, this was not the original name of this national park. This is something I didn't know. And it reminds me of how Obama made Mount McKinley officially Denali, again, bringing it back to the Native American name that referred to the mountain in Alaska. In this case, in 1929, the name was changed to Acadia from Lafayette National Park.
Lafayette National Park.
You know, anyone who's seen Hamilton and delved into the history there has discovered that Lafayette was this absolutely beloved, historic, almost like a Tall Tales type of figure. And
he was a classic adventurer.
Exactly. And all over the United States, there's streets and parks and buildings all named for Lafayette. And I never knew that there was a national park named Lafayette National Park. But in 1929, it changed into Acadia National Park. And it was founded in 1916.
It's
it had
wild,
a good run as Lafayette.
I mean, it's wild to hear about cancel culture so active in the late 20s.
Absolutely.
You know, poor Lafayette.
But what I think is funny is like they were clearly just looking around like, I don't know, it's got this French thing. What like French thing will Americans buy into? I don't know. Let's call it Lafayette. Everybody.
They just didn't have that many. They didn't have that many people to choose from back then. You know, they were like, it was only allowed to be white men. So that was like, you know.
Now we've mentioned several times Acadia is the only national park in the Northeast, and so it is the closest both to you and to me. And it is it's along the shoreline. The primary part of the park is called Mount Desert Island, and that's this large region where you'll do most of your hiking. But it does have an outpost that's further out and less populated, and that is a good place to go because Acadia sees over 2 million visitors annually. And it is one of the parks that is really, really having difficulty contending with over-tourism. And sadly, I have to say, we suffered greatly for that. We purposely, because we were there in August, we purposely were trying to go to Acadia during the weekday because we thought that would cut down on the amount of people that would be visiting. You don't want, you don't for COVID reasons, but also you don't want to have to contend for parking and getting out on the trail. And I kid you not, with the window that we had with the baby to hike for maybe 3 or 4 hours, we spent a full hour of that looking for a parking space.
Oof. That kind of stuff infuriates me.
It was brutal. It was to the point where we almost thought maybe we're not going to be able to hike in Acadia. It's like a slow, steady line of vehicles slowly milling its way through the few parking spaces that were available. And then, of course, it's like a feeding frenzy when somebody comes back to their car. So we actually ended up parking illegally in an RV space just because others were doing it and it was time. Like we had to get some hiking in.
Wow. Yeah. Renegade Kiernan.
I know. Well, Catherine and I basically gamed it out and we said, listen, if we get like $100 ticket, we could just say that was like, you know, we're donating to the national park in our head. That's fine. We'll pay it. As long as they don't haul us away, we're fine.
You didn't consider a handicap spot. You're like, that's a better spot and maybe just a little bit more money.
Oh, okay. I don't think people driving these gas guzzler RVs are exactly comparable to the handicap space, Ryan. But I mean, you know, Acadia is one of these parks where you can do a long 27-mile loop drive on what's called the Loop Road, and it's extremely scenic. Definitely something to take in. You get to see what's called Cadillac Mountain, which is a prominent mountain there. And all of these little parking lots that you have to fight for spaces for are off that main road. And so you can enjoy it from the car. Where Catherine and I ended up spending a fair amount of our time was a really scenic area called Jordan Pond. And it has connections out to some of the more popular routes. Particularly, there's these two mountains called the Bubbles, which, you know, I'm always charmed by the language that they choose. But they're these very rounded mountains. And so they're called the Bubbles. And we ended up doing a really nice lake hike there, got the baby in the backpack. But it's also a really great place. And Ryan, I know you're probably rolling your eyes that we're going to become a, traveling with children's podcast. But you know what?
God.
Ryan, there's a hunger out there for it. We need all the audience we can get. All right.
Yeah.
And the reason that Acadia is very good for that, interestingly, ties back to the Rockefeller family.
Really?
Yes. So
everything ties back to the Rockefeller family.
No point.
Cut that, please.
So the Rockefeller family, which of course were incredibly wealthy because of Standard Oil. So Standard Oil was begun by John D. Rockefeller Sr. Well, John D. Rockefeller Jr. Built 45 miles of rustic carriage roads that crisscross all across Acadia National Park. So you've got your traditional hiking routes, but then you've also got these carriage roads. And on these roads, you can ride horses, you can ride bikes, and you can push a baby carriage. And it's a great way to make the park more accessible to more people, and for different options of recreation. Right?
I'm just imagining the baby carriage while these horses are just like jumping around there. These mountain bikes, you're pushing this baby. Seems very precarious.
We didn't actually encounter horses. We encountered what they left behind. But I'm sure know that horses are allowed.
You hope that was the horses. You hope that was the horses.
And the roadways are so extensive that it actually took from 1913 to 1940 to build these. And they're very thoughtfully laid out. So just like a great hiking trail, you get great sweeping views of the mountains and of the shore, but you also get to feel like you're hiking through the woods at the same time. So it kind of takes you through all the terrain that you would get on a hiking path, but makes it more accessible. So yet again, we've got to thank the wealthy for paternalistically opening their pockets and bringing joy to the hoi polloi. Joy to the hoi pollois.
Joy to the hoi polloi. Yeah.
Now, Ryan, the only other thing that I want to call out about the park, while I mentioned that Mount Desert Island is the primary place that most of the tourists go, there's an additional little peninsula called Acadia at Schoodic Peninsula. And this is where I really recommend, especially if you're there on a weekend, go and hike there. There are far fewer people. The hikes there's less variety in the hikes, but it's on a beautiful spit of land that gives you a great view of the ocean. And it's just a much more laid back stay, because after you've been fighting for a parking space for an hour and a half, you really need to cool down with a hike. And so,
is there no Uber?
No, you can't Uber into the park, Ryan. Can you Uber into the park? I don't know. You have to pay $30 per vehicle. So I'm guessing you don't want to add that in, but you probably could. You do get cell service because it's close to Bar Harbor. So it's a little bit of a drive away. It's not connected to Mount Desert Island, the Schoodic Peninsula piece of Acadia, a great sort of hidden gem of the park. Now, I wanted to talk about where Catherine and I stayed, and the Downeast region does not incorporate Portland, which of course is the biggest city and deserves an episode of its own. We stopped in Portland on the way up, but where we were staying was 3.5 hours north of Portland on one of these tiny little islands called Beals Island. And it's truly a fishing and lobstering community, pretty traditional, and is connected to the shore by a short bridge, has a little Coast Guard station right there. And we happened to find a lovely, very nicely designed Airbnb. We could have the whole cottage. And it was a good launching point for getting out to explore some of the lesser known, lesser visited, less populated state parks. It's also notable that many families have stayed on Beals Island. So you still have many houses that have the names Beal on them. You also have Peabody and several other surnames that the families still continue to live on the island. So it's very charming for that. Also, though, you do stick out as a sore thumb when you're a tourist on the island, because it's like, you're the one at the Airbnb. The rest of us live here and work.
It is a little fish out of water when you're like, people know you're in an Airbnb house. It's always an Airbnb.
Totally.
They give you like a weird look when you walk outside. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got to throw your tourist dollars around, and then they forgive that.
Totally.
So one of the great things and the thing that appealed to me most about staying on Beals Island was that it's very close to a nature preserve that's run by the Nature Conservancy called Great Wass Island. And the Nature Conservancy is a really interesting NGO. Actually, Ren, you and I used to work for it when we worked at Blue State Digital. That was one of our clients.
I remember that. Yeah.
And what's cool about them is that they take this view, and they are evolving, but their traditional view since their founding in the 1950s was that they just wanted to raise money and buy swaths of beautiful land to protect it. So just, take it off the market, sit on it, and let nature come back. And that's what one of their slogans is, saving the last great places on Earth. And I would definitely say that Great Was Island fits that description. It's the perfect kind of coastal walk. It's a 4.5 mile hiking trail through forests and wetland. And it lets you out finally on this beautiful rocky shore that's quite secluded. When we were there, there was one family of hikers that happened to be there, but it was probably the most picturesque area that we went in Maine. And you could just kind of, trundle along the shoreline. You could take some beautiful, really Maine-looking photos, commune with the seabirds. I mean, it gives you that sort of peace of mind that we're all looking for, especially mid-pandemic.
That sounds beautiful.
And I am told that you can also sometimes see harbor seals, though we did not actually see them.
Did you see any evidence of them?
Did I see any evidence of harbor seals?
Half-eaten fish or
like a whisker.
Yeah, a whisker.
Yeah. I did not, but I do trust the resources that I took in. I do trust the resources that I explored, that they do actually exist. I don't think that the harbor seals are a myth. So don't let my lack of evidence keep you away from Great Was Island. But that's, again, it's one of the beauties. I do recommend when you go to places like Maine or one of these more rural areas. We've talked before about how state parks are a great and unique resource in American states that you should, even if you're going to a national park, check out what state parks are nearby. Similarly, looking for Audubon or Nature Conservancy protected lands. Usually there are some good hiking trails and you can get some of that same feel. So these are places that I always consult when I'm going on this sort of road trip, that I want to be outdoors focused.
Yeah, and even local parks. I mean, there were some beautiful just city run and town run parks in Tennessee. So, and we encourage folks to really look broadly around the area that you're visiting.
Yeah, and so really the research process for me on this, the Airbnb folks had done a great job of. They had these 4 enormous binders that just told you like everything that you could drive to within 3 hours, which is the sort of driving you have to be ready for in really rural Maine. And Catherine and I we looked at the Google map, we consulted that and a couple of guidebooks, and we really just chose state parks based on their proximity. Could the baby nap in the car and we could get there and have a few hours of hiking and then get back to the cottage. And they really did not disappoint. So one of the places that was within driving distance was a beach called Jasper Beach. And this wasn't intended to be a beach vacation. It can be really windy, and it's not always super warm up in Maine, even in the summer. I think 70 is the average temperature. So
that sounds amazing, though.
For you and
for
me, that's our kind of beach. I was hoping it'd be like 60. That's what I told a coworker I was going on this trip, and she said, "Bring a parka." I was just like, "Yes, I hope so." Well, Jasper Beach was interesting, and the reason that we put it on our itinerary was because its name refers to a kind of rock called jasper, which is a silica and iron-rich rock, which makes it very beautiful when it comes in contact with the ocean. And so it is this beach. Jasper Beach is a beach that is full of these rounded, fist size or 2 fist size rocks. And you get this kind of beautiful rainbow of colors, particularly in the sun. And apparently, the only other place in the world where a beach like this of jasper rocks exists is in Japan. So this is one of 2 places on Earth that you can have that experience.
That's quite beautiful.
Well, how people go to beaches like kind of obsess about like how wood and rocks have been like smoothed out by the ocean.
Yeah.
This is like that. You get these significant sized rocks, which are not incredibly comfortable to put your beach towel down on, but they are very rounded and lovely to look at, and they make a very pleasant kind of walking experience as you go along. There's some very picturesque kind of cliffs, and I will say a couple.
Barefoot? Are you walking barefoot?
No, I was not walking barefoot. I wouldn't recommend walking barefoot, but there were a few people there who were genuinely out having a beach day on this beach. It reminded me, actually, I don't know if you've ever been to a beach in England, but the beaches in England are not sandy. They're rocky. and they all have like big uncomfortable rocks. But British people love to go and pretend that it's sunny and not like 40 degrees and have picnics. And I remember when I went to Brighton Beach, which is a premier beach town in England. I was like shocked, like, okay, but where's the beach? And everybody was like, this is the beach. And I was like, this isn't a beach. And Jasper Beach is one of those. You're going for the beauty of the nature, not necessarily to build sandcastles.
Rocky Beach is, as somebody who grew up on ocean, on a Maryland beach, it is just fake sand for days.
Yeah. And close to Jasper Beach, there's another interesting hike and historic landmark that is called, Ryan, do you know what a yurt is?
A yurt?
Yeah, a yurt.
I don't think so, no.
Well, Ryan, a yurt is a large tent. It's typically associated with the Mongolians, and also I think they're also the Berber people. I think in Africa are known for yurts, and they are kind of transportable architecture that is very spacious, often laid down carpets. And in Maine, there was an artist whose name is Bill Coperthwaite. And Bill Coperthwaite, he died in 2013, but his work lives on, and he was known as a master yurt builder. And what he basically did was he bought this plot of land in the woods, and he built a huge wooden yurt. And gosh, it's very hard to describe, but it's basically like an enormous wooden, it almost looks like the Ewok village. Like if you know that reference, Ryan, but as a Star Wars fan, that's going to resonate with lots of people.
Oh, sure.
And it's this enormous structure that looks very rustic. It's completely made from handmade tools, and he actually lived out there. And while it is private land, you are allowed to hike on it if you call ahead. And my Airbnb host was kind enough to call ahead for all of his guests and get approval to hike out to this huge series of yurts, these little buildings. And they've got huge roofs. They extend. They're actually like several canopies stacked on each other. I'll post some pictures to the Instagram.
Yeah, I'm very curious. Do people stay in them?
Well, Ryan, not only can you stay in them, you actually can learn to build a yurt yourself. So the area where Bill Coperthwaite built the yurt is called Dickinsons Reach. And they actually run yurt building workshops that you can sign up for. Now, we did not do a yurt building workshop, but you hike basically, it's probably about a 45-minute to an hour hike deep into the woods, into this Dickinsons Reach area. And there are people who do take care of the yurts and who mastered this this art that Bill Coperthwaite taught, which was using simple tools to kind of return people back to what he called a democratic design. So, he's really considered a bit of a folk art genius. And it was all, I should say, the reason it's called yurts, even though it doesn't fit that classic definition of yurts, was because he actually came upon a National Geographic article in the 1960s all about Mongolian yurts, and the design so inspired his imagination that he decided he was going to build his own shelter in the Maine woods and leave it to be protected in perpetuity. And so when you go, you can actually kind of peer into the windows of this yurt, and you see that it's filled with all of these carpentry tools and kitchen tools. And if you really are looking to escape the grind of modern living, pack your handsaw and go out there and build a yurt.
It's sort of, I feel like yurts are coming back into style, right? It's sort of like glamping.
It is much more rustic than glamping, though.
But you could do a glampy
yurt. You could definitely do a glampy yurt. And
it's called a glurt,
I think
actually.
Glampy yurt is a great name. I wonder if we could get that URL. And the last state park that I want to put...
just by the way, glamping... luxury camping yurts are a real thing. So just flagging that.
Camping yurts, glampy yurts.
Glamping yurts.
And Ryan, so we've talked about Acadia National Park. We've talked about Beals Island, Great Wass Island Preserve. You got Jasper Beach. And I want to wrap it up with another great spot out in Maine, down east, that I would recommend, which is called Roque Bluffs State Park. And Roque Bluffs has two areas, both of which I think are well worth visiting, both within about a mile's drive of each other. And the first is just a half-mile crescent of a really beautiful beach. And there was, it wasn't crowded at all. There was plenty of space, but there were probably 30 or 40 people out there enjoying themselves, sunning themselves. And it's got the nice, chilly, brisk Maine wind. And it sits on what's called Englishman Bay, and is just a really lovely, simple beach. Catherine and I packed a picnic lunch, and we had a nice, calm time there. The baby was able to go out and play and dip his toe into the water and freak out. And then you could pair that, after you've had your picnic lunch, you go out and you hike in their 6-mile trail network, which brings you kind of deep into these coastal forests, and then it brings you along the shoreline so that you can get another spectacular view out into the ocean. So, I really felt like this was a great escape because it wasn't totally crowded, and it really gave you a feel of the state that you were in, the Downeast experience.
The Downeast experience. I feel like we've had that Downeast experience on this podcast.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Well, I feel like we've just scratched the surface with a state that's the size of Maine. There's tons to do there, and I do think we should revisit it. Maybe if you come up, we could actually go to Acadia together. That would be a fantastic trip. We, who hardly travel together, could certainly get that in the books.
Could we take the Flying Yankee?
We can no longer take the Flying Yankee, unfortunately, but I will get a Flying Yankee bumper sticker for my car, and we can drive up and we can sing Yankee-themed songs the whole way.
You sold me. I love it.
So, do not fear. We will return to Vacationland, but I hope this at least whetted the appetite of our listeners to go up to the Downeast and, take a road trip out to Maine, especially if you're in the New England area. It's a great place to travel during these uncertain times. To be honest, while I think in normal times, Catherine and I probably would have jetted off to a major national park in a plane, or we would have gone to Europe. This was a really perfect escape for us during a stressful time, and we immediately said we really wish we had spent like a month up there because it was so peaceful, because it felt removed from COVID.
I hear you, and we're going to hear more about some of my adventures, on the next episode, where I've done similar things.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan,
I'm inspired for Maine.
I think you're gonna tease us a little bit with that in the last stop. So I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Now, Ryan, we are here in the last stop. You're familiar with it. This is the final segment of the show, the last segment of the show. That's why it's called the last stop. And it's where we each take a moment to share one thing. It could be anything. It could be something we read. It could be something we watched. It could be something we cooked. It could be a piece of gear that we bought. It could be a tale we overheard, or a tale told directly to us. Anything that inspired the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. And frankly, all time feels like the workaday week here in the pandemic. So I think it's more important now than ever, the last stop. So I have to ask you, Ryan, as I do every week, did you bring a last stop this week?
I did, Kiernan. So as you know, I just recently drove from Waynesville, North Carolina, which is right outside of Asheville, all the way to Brooklyn. And we drove through Roanoke. And so that all told, that is about a 12-hour drive. So we divided it up into 2 days. And, the question we always ask ourselves is, how do you turn a drive or a work trip or something into an adventure? And we decided to ride some of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Do you know what the Blue Ridge Parkway is?
Yeah, it's. I believe it's like a historic scenic byway.
Exactly. It was they first started construction in the 1930s as part of the big New Deal, and it connects the Shenandoah National Park with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So essentially, you can drive from Shenandoah to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on this incredibly beautiful road with basically every couple of miles, places to stop and look around with hiking trails, with bikers. You drive 40 miles an hour, but it's a huge stretch of highway that goes all the way from Cherokee, North Carolina, all the way to Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. So it's a real stretch of road. Now, we did something that, we were going from Asheville to Roanoke, and when you look at the map, you can do that drive directly on the Blue Ridge Parkway. You don't have to get off of it. So we started driving, and we drove for about 2 hours, and then we passed a sign that said Roanoke. And we realized that we had only gained about 40 miles because what we didn't look at was a typical travel time. So if you look at the typical travel times from just Asheville to Cherokee, that's 3 hours. That is like on a regular road, like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So it is incredibly beautiful. You don't have cell reception. You feel like you're in the clouds a lot of the time, like you're sort of part of the clouds. All this great scenery. And right now, the fall was just sort of starting, so we're starting to see the leaves change color. A really unique experience, but not a replacement if you have to actually eventually get where you're going. It would be very cool though to take time off and to bike that whole path, which people do because it connects those two national parks. And we saw a lot of bikers. It would be a very strenuous bike ride because you're going through the mountains.
Is it because the speed limit is so low, or is it because it's so windy?
It's both. It's windy and the speed limit is low, and people are constantly pulling over to look at the overpass. So it is 469 miles long.
Oh my God!
And everything around it when you're driving is maintained by the National Park Service. So it's basically a massive national park.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's something that's been on my list. I've been to Shenandoah. I have not been to the Great Smoky Mountains, and it's because I don't want to just fly near the Great Smoky Mountains and go into the park, because I think getting there, this roadway is exactly one of the attractions that you want to build into your itinerary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that getting to see this would be something worth doing. And if you're just in the area, anywhere in this 500-mile stretch of road, if you just get on for 15 miles, you're going to see some really beautiful scenery. You're going to have the opportunity to pull over and maybe hike a little trail or take some pictures at one of the many viewing spots. So definitely something worth trying to fit into your drive. Kiernan, do you have a last stop?
Well, I'm sticking with the park theme, Ryan, but this time I'm not talking about an American national park. I'm talking about a news tidbit that I picked up in a Washington Post article that is about a drastic measure being taken to fight littering in a national park in Thailand. So Thailand's National Resource and Environment Minister shared a social media post that was a box of trash that tourists had left at a national park there, a national park that I believe is pronounced Khao Yai National Park. And it was a box of trash that was being mailed back to the tourists who had registered and who they knew who they were, had left this bag of mail with a note that said, "You forgot something at Khao Yai National Park." And, I think that this aggressive, no tolerance policy is exactly the way we need to go in order to protect our natural resources. It is notable that mailing trash back to individuals is not the common punishment for littering in Thai national parks. But what I went on to learn is that you can actually be fined up to $16,000 for littering in a national park in Thailand.
That's scary.
You know what else is scary? The Thailand National Park Act also allows for up to 5 years in prison for littering.
Gosh.
So these tourists should be pretty darn happy to get this box of trash mailed to them.
I mean, the Thailand episodes of Park Predators must be incredibly boring. It's like somebody drops a thing of trash and then, they track them down and put them in jail for 7 years.
I mean, for what it's worth, that might be more enticing than the actual episodes of Park Predators. I was really trying to get through this episode, not taking down that. I actually have a story that I want to revisit on next episode about Park Predators, where we're going to pull some of the audio to talk about the writing that podcast.
Oh, gosh.
But we'll save that for next episode. So anyway, the Thailand government taking protection of the parks very seriously, mailing a box of trash to people who left it behind. As communications professionals, Ryan, we can both appreciate, even though this is not the common punishment for leaving garbage behind, it certainly set the world talking about the problem of littering in public, beautiful outdoor spaces. And so it really accomplished that goal, and it got some publicity for the parks. All right. Now, Ryan, this week I concentrated on the Downeast region of Maine. I feel like it's your turn to start taking us inside the 9 years that you were traveling over the without your mic. So what are we going to talk about next week?
We are going to talk about Knoxville and the Smoky Mountains. So, much like this episode we just did today, we're going to be definitely talking about the Great Smoky Mountain National Park a bit, but also Knoxville and all the things to do in the surrounding areas. So super excited to talk to y'all about that.
I know nothing about Knoxville. I can't wait.
Well, after this, you'll know a lot about Knoxville. Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Oh, man, I could use a lobster roll today for lunch.
I don't know. You ate an awful lot of barbecue down south, my friend.
Oh, I know. I need to just be doing a cleanse.
Maybe go try to parallel park. That'll keep you busy for like 3-4 weeks. You can't
humiliating.
Get in the car.
There's a very good chance I've gone viral on TikTok for my parallel parking.
Ryan, you're too old to go viral on TikTok.